This is called a user experience story. It's going to be a little bit different, kind of different type of presentation. I hope you guys like this. Don't worry about, like, it's going to fly through a lot of slides, right? These are available at slideshare.net/JWD2A, so you can check that out as well. There's also, for your bonus enjoyment, an extended video version of this talk up on Vimeo, vimeo.com/JWD2A as well, from another event. So if you just are dying to see it again after this, you know, at least tell me that you are. So my name is Justin Davis. Thank you guys very much for coming. I run a company called Madeira Labs. We're a user experience design and interactive product design company. So we help companies basically design websites, applications, mobile, kiosks, you know, touchscreen, whatever those interactive products are. We're not a development shop. We just do design. I have a development background, but right now it's just about design for us. So that's what we do. We're all about user experience. It rocks. If you want to get in touch with me, please do so. JWD2A is my Twitter handle. So hit me up on there, or you can email me directly at justin@madeiralabs.com. Now, I don't know how many people saw me speak yesterday, so I'm going to repeat a little bit of information that I said there. I'm actually not from Tampa. I'm from Nashville, and came down here from Nashville for this event. That said, I'm going to be living here in Tampa next June. Getting ready to move down here. So I wanted to come down and spend some time with you guys, get to know everybody, and sort of get my feet wet, as it were. And I'd love to meet anybody here because I want to kind of get in with you guys and all that kind of thing. So there's the spiel. So if I look like a new face, it's for good reason. So anyway, what we're going to talk about today is a story. It's a fictional story, but I hope that what we're going to do through this fictional story is learn a little bit about 3 ways to rock the user experience on your website, okay? So this is Jane. Jane lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and she lives north of Atlanta in a city called Marietta. And she likes it there, big city, so she can kind of get away to the suburbs, and it's cool. She has a daughter named Becca, who plays soccer and all this. Jane's job is as an e-commerce manager. She works for a large company. They have a store as part of what they do, and they sell a lot of stuff online. And it's her job to manage the e-commerce side of everything, right? And so that means managing what people do on this website and ultimately making revenue through these ways. Things like buying stuff, right? She has to manage how people buy stuff on through this e-commerce site, signing up for newsletters and other things like that, leaving reviews and other activities that people normally do in an e-commerce kind of context. Well, Jane's pretty good at what she does. She's done it for several years, and she feels pretty good about it. So imagine then her surprise when on this Wednesday morning, she gets this email from her boss. It just says, let's meet about the online sales. I have a few questions. So Jane's a little bit concerned, right? She's never had a problem with her store. She doesn't know what's going on. And so she's like, oh boy, and the meeting is set for that following Friday. And she's worried because she feels like she's doing everything she can to get to make her store the best it is, right? She has the products in there. She's got the marketing going on. She's got great copy written. Customer service is rocking it. They're delivering great stuff. They're answering people's questions. And so Jane says, I don't understand what it is that I could be possibly doing better. I mean, to me, things feel like they're right. So Friday comes around, the day of the meeting. Awful day for a meeting. Never schedule a meeting on a Friday. But this is when he decided to schedule it. And she gets to work early, and she gathers up things like website analytics, her sales reports, her customer feedback, and all this. Things that might help show how good she's really doing online and make her case to her boss. She walks into his office at 9:58, just 2 minutes before the scheduled meeting, making sure to try to be prompt and get a few brownie points, into his corner office that overlooks downtown Atlanta. And she sits down in the chair across the desk from him, and he says, Jane, sales online are suffering. They're suffering. Things are down. We don't know what's going on. And Jane says, oh, but you don't understand. I mean, we've got marketing going on. We've got all this stuff out. We're doing more and more marketing every day. The products are in there. They're great. They're updated. Good imagery, good copy. We're giving discounts, shipping, bulk discounts, and all this. She goes, I don't know what to do. She says, yeah, occasionally we have people who call and they're like, I don't know how to do this, or I had a little trouble doing that. But, I mean, every website has problems, right? Every website has problems. Well, Jane's boss says, every website may have problems, but it's your job to make this better. You got to improve things. So in 8 weeks, let's come back and let's see how you're doing. Well, Jane leaves the office at 5:02, a couple minutes after she normally leaves. And she drives down to Lucky's, a bar down there in downtown, where she normally meets up with friends at the end of the week just to see, recap the week and all this, have a couple drinks and sort of relax. And she sits down and talks to one of her better friends, Bill. And Bill's also an e-commerce manager. And so they have a lot of things to share. And she sits down, she starts talking to Bill, and she says, Bill, you know, I have this problem, I had this meeting. She tells him about the meeting, and she's obviously worried, and she's on her second martini, and she's starting to sort of, you know, talk freely. And she says, Bill, I just don't know what to do. And he says, you know, Jane, we were actually in a really similar position recently. And we did some things with the user experience side of the website that actually really helped, because we had the products, we were doing the marketing, we had the customer service in place. But we looked at this stuff, we looked at it through these different user experience lenses, and you know what happened? Sales were up 13%. 13%. Well, Jane's pretty impressed. She says, Bill, is there any way you could help me out? Just tell me what you did. What was it that you did for the UX on your site to get this kind of result? Bill says, okay, what I want to talk to you about is 3 different ways that you can improve your website's UX. 3 different sort of lenses to look through. And that is making your website more simple, making it more obvious, and making it more polite. But before I get into these, he says, I want you to remember something, that when we build products online, that you've got to remember this. It's all about the users. You've got to build things for the people who are using the application, using the website, because ultimately, if it sucks for them, it's going to suck for you, because they're not going to buy things. They're going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else. And it's about having empathy, right? Understanding who your users are and what they're going through, knowing that they have goals, and those goals are made up of tasks, and understanding how somebody moves through those to accomplish their goals, and thinking carefully about how they do that. Well, Jane's listening, and she's kind of like, okay, I mean, this makes sense. She says, but wait a second, all this talk about the users, what about me? Right? What about me? I'm a business, I gotta make money. All this talk about making it great for them, there's no talk about how the business benefits from this. And Bill says, yeah, that's a good point, but really what it's about is about balance, because what happens is, most people put up websites and applications and all this, and they don't think about this side. They don't really think about the users like they should. They think, yeah, people will be using it and we'll build it, but they don't really do the research and really introspectively think through who they are. So if we can get moved toward a better balance between what the company needs and what the users need, we can produce a better thing for all parties involved. So he says, let's jump into these 3 things and let's talk about them. The first one is about making it simple. Making your website simple. And making your website simple is, well, pretty simple. It's all about what the user needs to accomplish and understanding that and catering to that and letting people get these things done. It means removing distraction, getting out of the way, and letting people get things done on your site in the easiest and simplest way possible. So, Lucky's has Wi-Fi, luckily. And so he flips open his laptop and he goes to Schwans.com and he looks at this and he goes, hey Jane, do you have a page like this in your store? And she goes, oh yeah, we have a page like this. Sure, it's, you know, people have their cart and they go to check out and then they hit this page, right? And it's great because they can either, you know, sign up on the site and register with us and all this, or they can you know, sign back in if they're a past thing. And this is a great thing and we really love it. It's working because, you know, they can, once they register, they can view their past orders, and they can manage their information, they can have faster checkouts. It's just great, all these wonderful features. And Bill says, yeah, that's cool, but what about this person? What about that user who doesn't want to shop with you again? Who's in a hurry? And making them register for your site, while beneficial to you as a business, sucks for them, and ultimately means they'll probably leave. Well, Jane doesn't really have an answer to this. She'd never really thought about the fact that people might not want to do business with her more than once, right? This is kind of an odd thought. And so she kind of stumbles, and Bill continues, he says, what you've got to understand is you've got to think about the groups of people. Who are the different groups? Every user isn't the same. Because there might be a group that wants to register because they want these benefits, they know they're going to shop again, and there's a group that doesn't want to register. And if you can identify these things, sometimes we call them personas, or something like that, then we can create better experiences for each group. So he opens the laptop again and he goes to profilers. And he says, Jane, I want you to take a look at this, right? Here, they're approaching it just slightly differently. What they've done here is, yeah, if you're a user and you've done this, yeah, you can sign in and you can get access to all those fancy features that you love, right? But look, if you're a new customer, proceed as a guest. You'll have an opportunity to create an account later. Unbelievable difference. Unbelievable difference. Amazon did this and increased sales by millions of dollars. Well, he says, basically what this is, this small change, this one little button, just thinking differently about how somebody moves through, means all of a sudden now both groups are happy. James pretty impressed. I mean, this is, right, this seems pretty easy. We'll just, change a button and just slightly change the flow. And it's all about knowing who's coming and thinking carefully about who's going to be there. So Bill says, okay, there's one way you can make it more simple. Think about who's using it and design specifically for separate groups. And think about that. The second thing, he says, I want to tell you something about Tesla's law of conservation of complexity. And James just goes, oh, Bill, two martinis, and I'm not ready for this kind of Tesla's law of conservation of complexity. Come on. Bill says, okay, what this means is simply this, that in any interactive product, website, application, whatever it is, there's an inherent amount of complexity. It's going to be there. It's going to have complexity. And you can't get rid of it. But what you can do is you can move it around. And so the goal is to take some of this work, take some of this complexity, and move it from the user onto the system, onto you. Right, so Jane balks at this. She's like, wait a second. Isn't that expensive? I mean, this now sounds like a lot of work, right? And he says, well, it can be, depending on what we're talking about doing, but ultimately, thinking in the long run, we can make a lot more money because people want to use our site, they come back, there's a lot more loyalty. And he goes to Belk.com, and he looks at Belk.com, and he says, I want to show you two different sites that basically do the same thing, cater to the same groups, basically, and have the same tasks, but approach the same thing in two different ways. So if you look at Belk.com, just like any other e-commerce site, just about, it has search. And in this search, it's made up of three different components. Step number one, choose your department, or leave it to default, which is all departments. But there's a lesson there. No interface elements on a website are neutral. You have to make a decision, even if you think, well, I'll just skip over this. Even in the back of your mind, sort of subconsciously, these few little cognitive cycles, you make a decision to leave that at the default. Number two, we have to put in our search query. And number three, we have to click to execute the search. Now, this is pretty standard. We see this on Amazon, we see this on a few different places, right? But I want you to see how JCPenney approaches this. So JCPenney, very similar, sells a lot of the same kind of things, and their search has two components. Enter in the search query and execute the search. We've just removed a third of the user's task. We've removed a third of what they have to think about through just the removal of the category. Well, Jane's a little bit skeptical about this, right? Bill continues. He says what this comes down to is Krug's first law of usability from a guy named Steve Krug who wrote a book by this title, and it's Don't Make Me Think. Even subconsciously, if our users have to sort of, in the back of their mind, go through mental cycles that they don't even know they're going through, that adds up over time and it degrades the experience over time. So if we can remove these decision points from a website, we can make it, the overall experience, feel better, a net positive for the user. So Jane thinks she has him on this one. She says, okay, but what about flexibility? I mean, what if somebody just wants to search in books? What if somebody just wants to search in this? Bill says, I know what you're thinking. If we remove the category selection, then all of a sudden now we have sort of a problem. People can't search within a category. But note, we can solve this. Remember, move the work from the user to the system. With JCPenney, if you search for a lamp, you get categories in this faceted search on the search results. So now the user has the ability to refine their search at a point where they have better context in terms of understanding how the website categorizes, what the taxonomies are, and all this. This makes a lot more sense in terms of how the user thinks and how they step through their task. It's not about clicks. It's about ascent of information, about moving forward in incremental tasks along a path. So these are two ways we can make things more simple. There are lots of different ways, but these are two different examples. Jane's nodding. She's like, okay, got it. Let's go on to the next one. What about making it obvious? Well, making it obvious is kind of related to making it simple, right? I mean, it sounds like it would be. And basically, it's all about not making users confused. Well, Jane puts her hand down, and she's like, Bill, some of our users can't use computers. I mean, seriously. Like, they put their email address in the address bar to check their email. I mean, some of them just can't use computers. We get these calls, there's nothing we can do. And Bill says, yeah, I understand that. Sometimes people can't use computers. Sometimes you think, oh my gosh, how can you be this stupid? But here's the thing, we're technologists. We're the people building these products. It's our job to make it easy. It's our job to make it easy. Not to expect that people can have a certain level of competency to use our product. Because if our competitor makes it easier than us, then that customer's going to go over there. And so there's a few ways to do this. And he says, Jane, when you came in here to Lucky's, how did you get here? She thinks, well, I got my car and I drove here. What do you mean? He said, well, how did you know how to get here? She said, well, I mean, I know the route, like, right? I just got on the road and I went. And he said, so you got on the route and you followed the street signs that told you where to go and how you were going to get here and all that, right? She says, yeah. I mean, I haven't memorized, but yeah, that's basically how I did it. He says, we can do this thing online as well with these things called signposts. Because as you drive around a city and you know where you are on the roads because of the road signs and the maps and all this kind of thing, you feel comfortable and happy, right? You feel like, okay, I know where I'm going, I'm not lost and all this. Well, guess what? Comfortable and happy online equals money because it means higher conversion rates, fewer cart dropouts, and all this. And so ultimately means a better business result. And online, these signposts take the form of things like navigation, titles, headers, and all this. These are the elements that show our user where they are and where the next turn is and how they move through the site. Now, it seems basic, but let's look at a couple examples. Look at Belk.com, he says, and he brings it up. It says, quick, Jane, tell me where you are on Belk's site. And she kind of looks at it, and she's looking around, she goes, oh, juniors. I say juniors, because there's that little breadcrumb that tells us that we're in juniors, right? Duh, of course. He says, yeah, so if somebody comes into this website via Google, which many people do, they come in not from the top, but they come in sort of deep in the site, our hierarchy. And they land on this page, it takes a little bit to get oriented and go, oh, that's where I am in the grand scheme of things in the site. By contrast, look at Yahoo. What page are you on now? Jane goes, oh, easy, electronics, right? I mean, they got this breadcrumb, they've got this header, the tab is highlighted to show me where I am. He said, that's exactly it. These things, the header on the page, the highlighted navigation in the section that you're on, and the breadcrumb, and breadcrumb is not navigation and signpost, it's a sub kind of navigation, but anyway. These are the things that make our users feel comfortable and happy, and they immediately know where they are on the site, and they know now where they need to go. And these are things that don't take much time and that don't take much money, right? It's easy to do this kind of stuff. It just takes attention to these kind of details, and it makes a world of difference. So this is another really interesting concept he says. I want to talk to you about this great book called The Design of Everyday Things by a guy named Don Norman. He wrote this in 1988. And in The Design of Everyday Things, Don Norman brings up a concept called affordances. And affordances are this thing that are the properties that determine just how the object is to be used. That's how he defines it. Well, he says, forget that fancy description. Basically what this means is, this thing is telling me to blank it. Not that word. But you get the idea. You fill in this blank with an action word. Something like push, pull, press, fill. This thing is telling me to take some kind of action on it. And affordances are the physical properties of an object in real life that make us understand in the real world how we're supposed to use stuff. Otherwise, we would just go around bumping into crap all the time, right? Because I don't know how to do this. And one of the best examples of affordances that work in the real world is with the humble door handle. And this door handle communicates to you. It doesn't have to say, pull this and it will open the large wooden thing called a door. It doesn't have to say that. You never have to think about how you use this object. You just walk up to it and you grab it and you pull it. And you never think about why you know that, but the reason you know that is because of the shape of the handle, because it fits perfectly in your palm. You have just enough room to get your fingers behind it, and it affords pulling, and it operates the door, and that relationship is clear. Through those physical properties, those affordances, it's clear how you're supposed to use this object, and you don't have to spin extra cycles on it. The converse of it is, of course, the push plate. You can't pull this thing. You can try to get your nails under the edges of it, but you really can, right? So the push plate communicates push because there's nothing you can do except for push on this thing. It has that affordance. He says, now if you do this wrong, you end up with something that looks like this. the push handle. And this is bad. He says, Jane, I want you to notice one thing that's on this picture that's not on the last two is that it has an instruction on how to use the interface. If you have to tell your user how to use a pretty obvious thing, there's probably a problem. We need to fix those. And so the key is to answer this question for your users, how do I use it? And we can do this in the real world, and we can do this online. So there are a couple examples of how you might do this online. And we go way back to like 1993 or whenever hypermedia and hyperlinks were invented, and we had this thing called a link. And it was blue and it was underlined, and that blue and underlined started to become a signifier, an affordance, if you will, that told us this thing is telling me to click it. Now our users understand that this is how we're supposed to use this object. And if we do this to something, we click that. We know it's a link. If we take that thing away, we take the affordance away, we get this, and we don't know which one of these words is the link, if any. And so if we start to obfuscate the functionality through visual treatment and these other things, then we start to confuse our users and induce some amount of extra cognitive load into the interface, which ultimately means they leave and they go, ugh, and that's not what we want. There's another great example. This is an input box. It's beautiful. It's probably one of the sexiest things online, to be honest. He says that an input box is really sexy because if you think about it, and you really never do, an input box has this little thing, this inner shadow on the top that tells you text goes in here. And it does that because actually that inner shadow represents exactly how a box looks in the real world. A box, an open box, casts an inner shadow inside of it. And so you know, oh, this thing can take stuff inside of it. That's how we know how to use this element. If we take it away, as the Chrome browser does, it removes the styling, things get a little bit more complex, right? Now, is this just a div with a border around it, or is it an input box? We don't know. We have to click around and see. And it starts to get more confusing. So the key is, Bill tells Jane, the buttons need to look like buttons, fields need to look like fields, links need to look like links. Don't cover up functionality with aesthetics and make things more confusing for your users. And communicate action through appearance. So that's how we make things more obvious. A couple examples. So the last thing we need to talk about is how to make things more polite. And Jane goes, polite? Really? I mean, it's a computer. Computers can't, and it's just bunches of ones and zeros. It can't be polite. And he said, well, no, I want you to think about web interfaces in a slightly different way. See, interactions are conversations. When we interact with something either in the real world or online, we're having a conversation with it. We do something, it says something back. We do something, it says something back. This is how we do this action evaluation loop, right? And by the transitive property, everyone remember the transitive property, if websites are interactive, then websites are also conversations. And one of the places that we see conversations happen online the most is on forums. And then the most notorious thing for being rude. And so he asked Jane, he says, do you have forums on your site? And she goes, oh yeah, I mean, we've got sign-up forms, order forms, comment forms, contact forms, without forms, tons of forms. They're everywhere. It's a highly transactive type of interaction. There's lots of different forms. He says, okay, well, let me pull up this form on this website. And he goes to TalkShoe. And he starts to fill in the form, and he goes down and leaves a few things out, and he hits submit. And it looks like this. And he goes, look at this. Like, this website is yelling garbage at me. A, it's in red, and it's kind of rude. Now, I understand that they want me to notice it, but action did not complete. What action? I mean, I did my action completed. Did your action not complete? I don't know what action you meant, right? And then we go down the thing. We have invalid password, must be between 6 and 2.5 numerics. So we can't believe it. Invalid email address. What is a valid email address? I don't know, right? I'm just a dumb user. I don't know what a valid email address is. This means nothing to me. This is how a computer talks, not how a person talks. It's rude. And he goes to another website, and he does the same thing, and it pops up this great dialogue, modal dialogue box, right? Like being smacked in the face by the website. And it says, please select a valid attendee type. Please respond to the question. Please enter the text in the image CAPTCHA. Nobody knows what a CAPTCHA is except for the developers. This is insane, right? This was built by people who didn't think about how the messaging would be done before they built the site. They just tacked on error messaging at the end. And furthermore, popping it up at the very end of the interaction like this is basically like going to the grocery store, doing all of your shopping, getting up to the counter, having them check out all your stuff, and you go to pay and they say, sorry, we're closed. It's that kind of insanity, right? So what we have to do is we have to move these things from rude to polite. And he goes to twitter.com and he starts to fill out the form and he fills out Bill and he tabs and it says, okay. And he fills out Bill's username and he tabs and says, oh, username's already been taken. And he goes through and it's helpful error messages in the right on time, right when he tabs off of the field. And it's great real-time stuff. It's like having a real conversation with somebody, right? And when you do this, it makes your website seem thoughtful, professional, appealing. And ultimately, that means that you, your brand, your business, have those qualities. So one more thing that we can do to make it more polite is showing status. He says, Jane, if I come up to you on the street and I say, how are you doing? And you just go, like it'd be rude, right? No one does that. You would kind of go, you would give me these auditory clues that tell me that it's processing, that you're waiting on an answer, that it's back here, response is coming, we just got to do some stuff with it, right? So we have to give people feedback. We have to show status, and we can do that simply like this. Loading. Tell people if it's going to take more time than, say a second, tell them, hang on, I'm thinking about it. And Expedia does a great job of this. He goes to Expedia and he fills out some dream travel vacations and it says, Expedia is searching for flights. Just hang on, you know what? We got this. Go have yourself another drink. Come on back. We'll have this for you. No waiting, no wondering if the application's doing something. It shows feedback. And this is how things can be polite. So the key is let them know what's going on. So there's two ways we can make it polite. So when we're thinking about our websites, we're looking at our applications and sites, think about this framework, he says. Think about simple, obvious, and polite sites to increase user experience on the website. So Jane's like, oh, this is great. Thank you so much, Bill. I have so many ideas. I can't wait to get to the office on Monday. She says, but Becca's got a game. I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. So she leaves Lucky's. Well, 8 weeks passes. It's the day of the meeting. We're gonna come back and now we gotta see how things are going with the site, right? So she gets there early in the morning, a little bit before 8 o'clock, just to get things ready. She gathers up things like website analytics, sales reports, and her customer feedback. She already sees on these things something has changed. Things are different. She walks into his website at 9:58, again, making sure to be 2 minutes early, and walks into that office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. She walks in and she sits down across the desk, and this time, Jane's not nervous. Jane's not scared. She's beaming. She's smiling. And he says, well, Jane, how did things turn out? What happened? Jane says, sir, I have great news. Sales were up 12%. In 8 weeks, we were able to increase sales 12% by just making the experience through the e-commerce, through the shopping experience. We were able to increase it this much just by paying a little bit more attention to how people experience the site. And Jane's boss is really happy. He's like, oh, this is great, Jane. This is awesome. What happened? What did you do? Well, Jane thinks back to all these conversations with Bill at Lucky's on the Friday afternoons, and the simple, obvious, polite, and the ways that she worked her tail off with her developers and designers to try to put in these small tweaks to make the experience better. And all these different things, and she thinks, I could tell him all these things, but it's not his job to know about all that. He doesn't really care about all that, And so she just sits back in the chair, and she looks at him, she says, sir, I learned something really important. I learned that when we have a product online, when we have our website, it's really all about the users. Thank you, guys.